Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Greetings, listeners. My name is Ronda, Chervin, and this is a show on I Thought You'd Like to Know This Too. And I'm interviewing a writer, David Basconi, who has just published a book recently called Nonsense to Horse Sense, How Horses Tell Us the Truth. And this book has a very interesting history related to me, namely, Dave Basconi was in a group I had of lay people when I was teaching at Holy Apostles College and Seminary. On Sundays, a group of lay people came together to do a book of mine called The Way of Love, also published by En Route Books. And he started talking about his horses and his stable and relating things to his horses. And after a while, some of us thought, you ought to write a book about this, Dave. This is so interesting. People would love this. And he finally did. So now, Dave Basconi, could you tell us a little bit about your own early years and how you became interested in horses at all?
Yes. Hello, Rhonda. Good to be with you. And the early years. Well, I grew up in southern coal mining West Virginia in the early 50s. And I have to say, things were quite different then. It was a relatively poor area. It was part of Appalachia. But despite that, I had an excellent childhood. I was surrounded by a loving family, and there was always plenty to do in my parents' hardware store. I played high school sports, went to college in the area. I graduated with a degree in engineering and then moved to Connecticut. One thing that did not happen during my childhood was getting a horse. I tried, started at a very early age with a pony. Then after I outgrew the pony, the horse, but we never really lived in a place where we could accommodate one. So even though I had the horse bug back then, nothing ever came of it. My move to Connecticut was for a job, and a couple of years later, I was married, and I kind of forgot about the horse thing until my wife and I were ready to move. By then, we were empty nesters. Our two sons were out of college and on their own. So we found a horse property, and I got my first horse at age 56. So a little late, but it did happen. Most people are thinking at 56, I need to maybe start slowing down and plan for retirement, and I kind of went in the other direction. I just added work 7 days a week. Horses are not 5 days a week with the weekends off. They're every day. But it was a good move, and I'm very happy that I did it.
Right. So now, what gave you the idea that these horses could teach you something as well as just being beautiful and you love to ride horses?
Well, that I think I actually backed into. It never did occur to me early on that this could be the formation of a book. And by the way, you said horses, so more did show up, but we'll leave that for the book to explain. In short, the barn became my sanctuary. My best friends were there, and this is important. It was quiet. I could actually hear myself think. And even though my background was engineering, I always had an interest in philosophy, especially wisdom from the ages. And that actually is what prompted my first email to you was I saw an article in a little newspaper about what you were doing and that you were a professor of philosophy. And I sent you over an email, and quickly I received an answer, and then we started the dialogue, and that's how it all started. So I did enjoy, like I said, philosophy and especially wisdom from the ages. So in the quiet of the barn, I would start thinking about the nonsense of current events. Also, by then, I'd learned some things about horses, and I remembered thinking, how have horses survived millions of years on this planet as a prey animal? In the wild, they are surrounded by predators, not to mention having to deal with the elements. So how is it that they've survived? And that's when it got interesting. As I started to unravel some things, I found a pretty sharp contrast between horses and us. Now, I must say here, I'm not an expert on anything. I'm not on people, on horses, not engineering, not philosophy. The list goes on, and you know me. You know this is the cold, hard truth.
No, that's not. People don't realize this. Some of the most popular books ever written were not written by people who had PhDs in those subjects, but were written by people who had a fresh look at life, maybe because they hadn't been teaching their own theories for years. In any case, the basic theory of this book, From Nonsense to Horse Sense, which has beautiful photos in it and is just wonderfully written in easy-to-understand language, is about how horses display what is called natural law. And could you just explain to them, before I read one of your accounts of this, parts of that, just explain to them what natural law is itself, because most people have never heard of that term.
I guess my interest in the nonsense and by then the horse sense started to reveal some things about where both groups are today. The title you mentioned, Nonsense to Horse Sense, with the subtitle, How Horses Tell Us the Truth About Ourselves and How to Live. But, that's when the book kind of, I'm deviating from your question a little bit. Let me get to that just a little bit later in the interview. But there's a couple of things I wanted to point out.
Sure.
And then I'm going to swing back around to your question or to your comment. But that's really when the book idea came to life. And I wanted to ask you, do you recall my first approach was to you? I said, I have some facts. Can you write the book? And do you recall your answer to that?
No.
I can, and it was short and sweet. It went like this. I'm tired of writing. You write it. I'll help. That was that. Yeah, because.
Well, I've written about 10 books since then, so that's why I don't remember that I said that.
Okay, then those other subjects or other topics must have been more interest. But your involvement in some of the early chapters really set the template because, I was kind of, all right, don't really know how to pull all this together. So you kind of got me on the right track. And I want to thank you for saying no, for one, and then for your help because, like I said, once I kind of got the proper steering here, then it made everything work out much easier. I did set some guidelines for the book, and you already touched on one. I wanted it to be an easy read. The chapters are short, so if you just want to spend 10 minutes a day with it, that's easy because of the short chapters. I would say that the average adult could read it in probably 2 hours total. So either 10 minutes a day for a couple of weeks and you're done with it. The other thing was a wide age range. I wrote it for both for teenage and up, not just teenagers, but teenage and up, so that the parents of the teenager could read it and the grandparents could read it and all get something out of it. They would probably get it at a different level because of the maturity for each group, but it does have a wide range of ages.
Okay, Dave, I didn't think of this before, but you know it would be extremely helpful to anyone listening if you just read one chapter to us, read one chapter aloud, because otherwise it gets too vague.
Well, let's see if I can find a short one.
Yes.
Okay. I tell you what, this is the introduction. How about we start there? And because it does set up the rest of the book, I think. Ronda, are you there?
Yes.
Okay. From the introduction. This is posted at my barn. I was drawn to horses as if they were magnets. It was in my blood. I must have inherited a genetic proclivity toward the equine species. Perhaps a quirk in the DNA makes horse people different from everyone else. Instantly divides humanity into those who love horses and the others who simply don't know. That quote is from Alan J. Hamilton. I then go on to say, and you've heard this, I'm not an expert on horses or people. I'm an engineer by education, and I'm not an expert in that field either. I do have horses to care for. I am an observer, and I do have the quiet of the barn to reflect upon those observations. This book is simply about my observations and thoughts at the barn. It is not another book on horse care or human psychology. There at the barn, I started to learn some truths about horses that seemed to parallel some truths about us. And in time, I saw the two converge into one. Some truths, I now believe, exist independently of all other things. These truths are the foundation on which a society is built or destroyed, the fine line being whether that society chooses to accept or reject them. And that's the introduction. And the very first line, it's a paragraph, but it's a single sentence on chapter 1, titled this book. It starts off with, horses don't think like us. I'll read it again. It sounded a little faded at the end. Horses don't think like us. The second paragraph, that discovery came quickly after I started working with them and was one of the most valuable lessons ever. I have learned as much from horses as from people and books. So that's a little bit from the very beginning of the book. And,
okay, now you get an idea of the style. So let's go back to natural law for a minute. So natural law is the following. You have things that are laws of the country that relate to that country. So, for instance, the laws we have for driving on the road would make no sense whatsoever to people living before cars in the 18th century, say, or 19th century. They would never understand all these rules of the road that we have. That's human law. Natural laws are considered by philosophers, all the way back to the Greeks, by the way, is considered to be those laws of ethics that you have to have in order for human life to work. So you get to things like elements of justice. You can't just steal from other people because this leads to murder and bloodshed. So justice is something that refers to every society and every human being. So now I'd like to just read something that Dave wrote for an article he wants to write for a newspaper, and where he talks about justice, and you'll get the idea. Okay. So every society has to have justice. Today, justice is laws and courts, the means used when higher values have been abandoned. Okay, what would be a higher value that's been abandoned? Okay, if people will all have the value do unto others, I'm just adding here because I'm a philosophy teacher. If people would love your neighbor as yourself, you wouldn't need laws and court. So the laws and courts are man-made. True justice is as organic as our will to survive and comes about when the truth of survival is understood and lived. So the truth of justice is it's unjust to steal from another person. So, okay, now let's relate this to horses. Do horses steal?
No, they do not. Matter of fact, when you start talking about natural law, that was part of one of the guidelines for the book. What is it? It had to be natural law ethics. It would not come from. It was not going to be a religious or political book, because natural law ethics can, I think, guide us to how we should live without, the influence of politics or religion. We can still get to a good point or a good place just by using natural law ethics. Now, the letter, I'm sorry, what your question was?
Well, the question is, how do horses come into this? Anyone can understand what we just said, but how do horses come into it?
Well, this is where I really like to, tell people, read the book and you'll start to see it. But one of the things that horses have is clarity of purpose. Matter of fact, that would have, if I had continued reading in chapter 1, let me go to it, and I'll just, maybe that'll make it a little easier. Chapter 1 was horses don't think like us. That discovery came quickly after I started working with them and was one of the most valuable lessons ever. I have learned as much from horses as from people and books. Horses have clarity of purpose that most of us don't. They live that way every day. It's not just a concept to them. We, on the other hand, often complicate things just enough for a bit of nonsense to creep in. And if we are without clarity of purpose, we allow that little bit of nonsense to grow and to spread to other people and things. So that was, as a prey animal, you have to have clarity of purpose. The letter that you were reading from was more toward what I think we're doing in our way of living, that is, moving away from natural law ethics. For example, the letter, the next paragraph in that letter is, to put things in perspective, a functioning community with 10 laws is stronger and more just than if it needed 100 laws. If in time 1,000 laws were needed, then that community has deteriorated to the point of collapse. I think if we keep piling on the laws to get justice, which tends to be our way of doing things, we're in a state, we're in a bad place.
Okay, so let's get this back to horses. So the horse goes every day, the horse knows by instinct that it needs to eat, and it goes and gets its food, right?
Yes.
So it doesn't think, what I have to do is figure out how to break into Dave's house and get something that's locked up in his house. It eats what's in the stable, or it eats what's outside there, right?
Yes.
So it doesn't work out a whole system for bypassing its own natural way of doing things, right?
Yes, exactly.
Whereas we would think, well, instead of working, suppose I steal instead. I can get everything for free.
Well, I think what I found was that with horses, they have a hierarchy. There is a herd leader, and they respect the herd leader. They acknowledge the herd leader, and everybody in the herd, all the horses in the herd, take on a role, and they don't use politics and egos to, determine who's going to lead. It's the strongest, the best leader is the one that leads. They don't have they don't have any nonsense, because in the wild, you don't elect someone because they're popular. You elect someone because they can lead. And I think when it comes to us, we get into trouble when we start to get away from these truths of survival. For example, if we spin things, if we spin the truth, then we're getting away from reality. And reality is the place where horses live, where if we choose to live in a place of invented truth, and I say that in the letter in the next paragraph. What happened? How did we get here? Well, bad paths lead to bad places. A society that invents truth is inferior to a society that seeks truth. Invented truth is the path on which 10 becomes 1,000. I'm referring to the number of laws again. So invented truth can be something that comes out of spin. I think when people are self-centered, they make choices. Their truth is something that serves them. It's not the truth. It's their truth. And also enslavement can be sources for invented truth. Whereas horses can't live that way. You can't invent things when you say, I don't see the predator, and the predator goes away. No, in the wild, if you see or hear or smell a predator, that's the truth, and you have to deal with it. And so it was that kind of contrast that I saw between how they live and how we start to change truth, and as a result, that gets us into this nonsense that we're in. So does that help clarify it a little bit?
Yes, it does. Well, when I read it several times, that was a while ago. But right now, as you're saying this, David, I'm thinking of an example that I teach often, but which would just express it in terms of horse sense versus nonsense. A person decides that sex, which usually leads to babies, little babies, right? That we're going to do this and contracept, and we're going to take a pill which hurts the body of the woman in order to have sex without having babies. And then after a while, the woman has all these illnesses that come from taking this totally unnatural pill. They have no babies for a long time, and then suddenly they're now in their late 30s, and she can't conceive in this. That's all total nonsense from not doing what the body is created to do, right? So you don't have a problem of contraception with horses.
No. Again, in the wild, there's a stallion that usually leads the herd. He's a protector and a defender, and there's usually a mare that will maintain, discipline in the herd. So, and usually in the herd, there's only one stallion. He wins that role by forcing all the other stallions to move on, and there could be several mares in the herd. So there's a system in place that has allowed these prey animals to live for millions of years. And it's so basic, and that's what I'm calling the truth of survival. When we start to tap into the truth of survival and apply it to our society, then some things really start to make sense. And I say in that letter, again, going back to that, the book just touches upon justice. It doesn't do, many, many chapters on it. It's just to get people to think about it. And I think we all have a sense of justice in us. We may not be able to explain it, but we know it when we see it. Do you recall, and this was many years ago, when that debate or that controversy came up about art versus porn? And I think it had to do with nudity on display in public areas. I think it started with, okay, what's the difference between a 2,000-year-old statue in a museum showing nudity versus the way we show it today? And it went to the court system, and the judge had to decide, okay, are they both art? Are they both porn? Is one art and one, pornography? I can't remember exactly how he ruled, but I think he did say there is a difference. And he made the statement, I can't explain it, but I know it when I see it. And I think we all kind of feel that way when justice is served. And I have an example that can illustrate that a little bit. We may be disappointed in the outcome of something, but still feel that justice was served. And the analogy I came up with, and I hope I do it justice, no pun intended here, is a sporting contest. Let's say you're a very devoted fan, and your team is playing a rival. Now, let's say the game is well played. Well played meaning no officiating errors, no dirty play by the athletes, and no interference from the fans. However, when the time runs out, your team loses. Even a devoted fan playing a rival can say that justice was served. Their team was outcoached and outplayed and did not deserve to win. So your team got beat fair and square. That's justice. My wife will ask me who won, and when I tell her the other team, she'll say, well, that's too bad. You must be upset. I go, no, I'm not. The other team played a better game. Maybe we'll win next time. So in my case, the outcome was disappointing, but justice was served. Now, if we go back to the same game with a few changes, this time the game was marred by horrible officiating, dirty play by the athletes and unruly fans, a lot of bad calls by the refs. Now, devoted fans now get the sense that the outcome of the game was affected by all of the above, and they're outraged. Now when their team loses, justice was not served. And that, I think, is that there is a difference that even though the same event, if there is corruption involved, that impacts how we see or how we feel about was it just or unjust. And, if the purity of the game has been scarred by someone's actions, then there's the reason for the outrage. So, and that's my point in the letter. We need to look at the root cause of things, and instead of just adding rules and regulations and laws and courts, by looking at the root cause, and we see that we're moving away from survival values. That's what's bringing the injustice, and we're going to collapse if we just keep piling on laws. And so that's how I tried to bring it all together, that horses were the inspiration, about natural law ethics. Not that there's a one-for-one item that horses do this, we do this. Okay, it's not, but they were the starting point and the inspiration. And I think if we start to think in those terms, then we will have a better society. Otherwise, it's just going to keep going. We go from 10 laws to 100 laws to 1,000 laws, and after a while, it's just pure chaos.
Okay. Now, there's no way that in a half-an-hour program you could get any idea of the genius of this book. You have to read the book with the pictures and all his reflections about Dave Basconi. It's Dave Basconi, Basconi, David, David, and that's En Route Books. That's the book, the same publisher that sponsors this WCAT show. But if you go back to the publishing arm, you can find it. Or if you just Google search the title, From Nonsense to Horse Sense, you don't need the whole subtitle. If you just Google Nonsense to Horse Sense, Basconi, Basconi, you can see more about the book and actually enjoy this book. And I had a wonderful time giving this book to my teenage granddaughter, who spends every afternoon at the stables and loves horses above all things. And it's very nice to give her the book and get her into this higher philosophy of natural law, get her introduced to this through something she loved, which is horses. So there are probably more people who love horses than love natural law. What do you say, Dave? Do you think so?
Oh, I think so, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I will say that I had an interesting experience. One of the other things that in writing the books was to use natural law ethics, not to make it political or religious. And the other thing was to make it so that you didn't have to be a horse person to enjoy the book. Matter of fact, I think non-horse people might enjoy it even more because they're learning some things, whereas the horse people already know all of this. But I was at a horse show back in March, and I was at a booth. It was a booth that had books. And so I was there to talk to people and promote the book and all. But a couple came by in the morning, and they bought a copy of the book. And later that afternoon, they came back. And remember I said it was about a 2-hour read from start to finish. Well, this fellow had 3 hours to do something with, because a lot of times when you see men at a horse show, they're there for their wives. And so he said he read the entire book in the 3 hours, and he said he wanted to start a fundraiser. He wanted to buy 100,000 copies and give one to every politician in the country. So,
oh my gosh, that's fantastic! That's fantastic. Yes. Well, I must say the side effect for me of working with Dave on the book in a very peripheral way was that I got this enormous love of horses. So I'm living with my great-granddaughter, and they have this movie called, what is it called? It's about horses with girls with a horse. It's it's a cartoon.
Oh, I don't know. My granddaughter's
it's a very famous cartoon that all kids watch. And I just had my heart went out to these horses. I just love seeing these horses all because of reading this book. So we strongly recommend that you get hold of this book. And David, would you like to just say a closing prayer relating this book to God's creation?
Well, Father, you are the creator of everything. You created us. You created horses. You created everything, the sky above us, the ocean. Please allow people to appreciate your creation. Allow them to see wisdom in animals, especially in horses. Again, they are such a beautiful part of this life on this earth. Just please allow people to take the time and allow them to fully appreciate everything that you have done for us and will do forever. Amen.
Amen. And I'd like to add a prayer. Please, Jesus, help us to just do the right thing instead of developing very complicated excuses to do the wrong thing. Amen. God bless you, Dave.
Thank you, Dr. Ronda. Take care now.
And God bless all you listeners. Amen.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.